I just love coming to this conference. I can't believe last year was the first time that it happened, but I walked away from the day like so inspired and went immediately into like strategy mode, thinking about outcomes. I am just really blessed that we're having a conversation here about small businesses and what that journey is like. And I'm thrilled to be here with Melissa and Pinky and Nyla. And we're really gonna start by talking just in a very personal way about what that experience has been like. So I wanna point to some of the data that we've seen today, Melissa. So from 2019 to 2022, we saw an explosion in the number of Black businesses created. That number over doubled from 4.8% to 11%. But the thing that we heard that was really disheartening is that the equity that Black business owners are holding has decreased in that time. And so I know you've been an entrepreneur, an investor, a researcher on this topic. Can you just help to set a little bit of the context of what's going on and what are small business owners and entrepreneurs really going through in this moment?
Sure. So honored to be here. Thank you all for sticking around for this conversation. I think one, let's look at historical and then how we got here. So I think we have to be mindful that before George Floyd, there was already an increase in Black entrepreneurship. But because typically our wealth that exists is not the same for our white counterparts, we see less angel investment, we see more taking on debt, we see higher expenses to start a business. It costs $250,000 more for a Black founder to start the same exact business as their white peer. And so we have seen this kind of uphill battle. Mm-hmm. What happened was that we almost thought we solved this post-George Floyd because there was a flurry of grant dollars that came in. And so it set the stage of, hey, let's support Black businesses. And you had a flurry of dollars that went to Black GPs or other funds that were focused on BIPOC or Black founders. But now that you have, I get the amen corner right here. But now that you have, and so you had this moment where the wave, you were riding the wave, and then we saw the lawsuits, right? We saw everything that we talked about today. We saw an economy that is not serving us well. We see the lawsuits where people are afraid. We see the retraction of DEI. And so what we've done now is just set up a bunch of founders where there is now potentially going to be a dearth of follow-on financing, where we know that Black businesses last longer, but there's no wealth created either because they've borrowed themselves to subsidize their growth, or if they have gotten an investor because their valuations, you say when you go into a Black person's home, take all your art down because you automatically get a lower valuation. We see the same thing in the business space. And so with a lower valuation but more money needed, now you are nowhere on the cap table. I mean, I've known Pinky for a while, but part of what I think Rich is doing at New Voices is because both of us used to see Black female cap tables, like they were upside down by round two. Yeah. Because they don't take the value that they put in, they don't justify it, and there's just general skepticism. So I think what we're seeing now, just to cut to the chase in terms of founders, is a reduction in optimism because we're not seeing where the dollars are going to come. I think we're very much concerned about the legal environment. We're grateful to firms like Gibson & Dunn who are out there paving the way for free to help support us. But I think the reality is that they're very scared of what's going to happen because there is a concern also with all of the George Floyd money that a lot of the fund managers who had Fund 1 and Fund 2 will not get to subsequent funds because those checks are no longer available. So I think one of the things that we're really thoughtful around the BEA fund is thinking, how do we move down and move out of seed to seed plus Series A so that we can capture those best in class deals and allow them to continue while we hope and pray the market corrects.
Yeah. Pinky, I'm going to go to you next. Somebody who is always keeping it real. I live in Brooklyn, and it was amazing to see the Brooklyn restaurant open. And I know you just had your opening downtown Manhattan, rivaling any Spike Lee block party, right? So we've been celebrating you from the sidelines. 14 restaurants, raised 20. You raised $25 million in your Series A, right? We were all celebrating that, over $100 million valuation. To Melissa's point, you have been living the journey. So can you just keep it real with us? I want to know, has there been a point where you were like, I have hit a wall, this is it, I'm out, I am done?
Yesterday. Yesterday, I hit a wall, okay? I don't go to therapy, but this is therapy today.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I was talking earlier about yesterday for the first time, y'all. I felt like I wanted to throw in the towel, and I keep it like all the way real.
No.
And the reason why I felt like I wanted to throw in a towel, I'm gonna be like so real and raw with y'all. So if my investors call me, it ain't my fault, okay? I had 16 calls yesterday. Let me back all the way up. I did some reorganization in my business because, you know, things, people, places, and things have their expiration date, right? So I had to do some reorganization. That's my political way of saying it, right? So in that level of reorganization, I am now the CEO, the president, the COO, the chief of staff. Sometimes I'm flipping burgers and shaking fries. It depends on what day of the week, right? But because I'm doing that, there's a lot of burden that comes with that. Because at the end of the day, there's nobody in this world that loves my dream like I love my dream. You understand what I'm saying? Investors gonna put the money down, yeah, but at the end of the night, it's just me, my pillow, and God. I gotta think about how we're gonna make sure that we pay payroll and how our insurance is gonna get paid and like the revenue. Like we see a dip in business, is it just my business? Now I got to do the research and find out about other businesses. So in real time, I'm feeling the burn. And you said something, Melissa, about 2020. There was so much chaos happening in the world in 2020, but I was on top of the moon, right? You got the pandemic that's happening, God rest his soul, George Floyd and Rashard Brooks and everything, the riots and everything, but it was the best time to be alive in business. Because what happened was these big corporations wanted to go find the little guys, right? And say, you know what, we want to help you, we want to give you money. I'm talking about lines down every single block. It was so much, I felt like a stripper. I couldn't even stop the money from coming. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. Right? then I do, don't act like you ain't never been to a strip club.
Make it hundreds, though. Make it hundreds.
So then I do this $25 million raise, right? And shout out to my investors, Danny Meyer, EHI, New Voices, Richie Lou Dennis, like goats, right? Like if you got them on your cap table, then you obviously are doing something right. So from day one, they have been so consistent and supportive. But at the end of the day, when you get that kind of money from somebody, what you got to do? You got to produce. You got to perform. And sometimes lack of performance is out of your control. I got a very viral brand. Slutty Vegan is a household name right now with only 14 locations. But when we think about virality of a brand in 2020, when I'm doing all of these numbers in a store, and then 24 months from 2020, now it levels out. On paper, it may look like, okay, there's a dip. What's going on? No, it's just the virality, the economy. This is what's happening. So when you ask me, as a small-owned, black-owned, woman-owned, minority-owned business, is it hard? Absolutely. Yesterday, I'm like, I'm 95% about to call some private equity and sell this company. But I knew that's not what I really wanted to do. But sometimes it makes you feel like that because once upon a time we were oversubscribed, and now I'm like, hey, hi, like we need some money, right? Because it costs $875,000 to build a Slutty Vegan. $25 million can go really fast. So being an entrepreneur is really not for the faint at heart, especially being a black woman-owned entrepreneur. You said something when we were walking here, and I know this is your answer for the question, but I want to jump in. So what she asked her is like, you say we're not able to fail as a black-owned business, right? And I want to respectfully disagree a little bit. We are able to fail because a lot of times they expect us to fail, right? But you really can't fail again, and I'm gonna tell you why. I was in a room the other day at a summit. You know how they have like communities of summits with the portfolio groups, right? And I was at an event, and I was the only person who looked like me. Follow me here. And I was sitting there, and I said, damn, if I fumble the ball, and if I have to close my doors, one, I'm gonna be a Netflix documentary if I gotta close, right? And I'm not willing to make that happen. But if I have to close my doors, there is no second chances for another black founder. We're not gonna be able to go back in these rooms because they're gonna say, well, Pinky couldn't figure it out, so we don't trust another black founder to do it. Those are the conversations. I know I went on, I'm sorry.
No, but in those moments when that weight is on your shoulders and it's you and your pillow, who do you call?
Ghostbusters. I call them. My husband is in the industry that I'm in. I pray, meditation. Like, you really don't know what your faith is until, like, your back is up against the wall. I'm gonna tell y'all a real story, and I've never said this out loud. There was a moment where, you know, in any business, I don't care how much money you're making in business, the biggest companies have cash flow issues.
That's right.
Right? So a billionaire that I know, I'm not going to say his name out of respect to him, but a billionaire who I just call and just tell him all of the accolades, all the things that I got going on. Here I am with this $10 to $15 million portfolio. I'm like, hey, so-and-so, I need to sell this building to you just so I can just have some liquidity, right? And in 3 days, he let me buy that, he bought the building from me in 3 days.
Wow.
But I say all that to say that, like, you really gotta, like, be able to move and shake as an entrepreneur, and only God can really give you the direction to do that.
Yes.
Well, boy, your comment is just connecting back to the data that Raj Shetty presented earlier, because he talked about socioeconomic mobility is so linked to who do you know that has money, that has the experience. Not many of us have someone we could call and say, let me hold $3 million,
Exactly.
right?
Yes.
And the fact that you could do that and the person had the capital, but the liquidity to do it, but also someone you could trust, right? Nyla, I want to transition to you because we know Pinky is the next 1,000, but when I think about you, class of 2025 at Spelman, not even graduated yet. So I look at you and I think, okay, let's build the next 1 million Black businesses. I know you're a part of the Center for Black Entrepreneurship, which is a collab between the BEA Foundation, Spelman, and Morehouse. But I'm really curious, what created that spark in you to get so heavily involved in entrepreneurship? You know, and tell us a little bit more about the center and the support, you know, sort of ecosystem that exists there.
Yeah, of course. So honestly, I never necessarily had that spark of like, okay, you're an entrepreneur now. Most people, when they go into college, it's to go work for somebody else, and I had the same mindset. I went in originally as a political science major, thinking I was gonna be a lawyer, work for a big firm, and well, you know, the rest is history. But I'm gonna also rewind back to my upbringing. So I'm originally from Milpitas, California, and if anyone is familiar with Silicon Valley, it is not a lot of us. Not a lot of us at all. And there was an experience that happened to me when I was playing with my best friend at just 8 years old, and she had said, "Your skin looks like dirt." I was like, what? And that really affected me, and I was like, wow, you know, everyone else is being compared to looking like Cinderella and Barbie, and I'm being compared to dirt. And that really stuck with me, and I felt like it was true, not because, you know, this is another 8-year-old telling me this, but because whenever I'd open the textbooks, it was reinforcing the same thing to me. It was telling me like, hey, yeah, you're a descendant of poverty, a descendant of slavery, a descendant of malnutrition, while everyone else is known for the Great Wall of China, the architecture. They're known for these great, vast things, but the education system was teaching me and reinforcing to me that I was a descendant of basically nothing. And so this really affected me, and finally when I got into middle school, I reached out to my mom, and I was like, Mom, like, why am I supposed to be proud of this? Like, why am I supposed to be proud of coming from nothing? And she was like, what are you talking about? That's not true. And she began to teach me with her own flashcards, where I learned that we are the richest continent on this planet to date. We're a descendant of diamonds, golds, queens and kings, the first engineers, inventors, and the list goes on. And as I got older into high school, I began to raise my hand and correct the teachers when they're telling me that we are from nothing. I corrected the teachers. I said, no, that is not true. We are a descendant of the richest person on this continent still. And yes. And as I began to raise my hand and correct teachers, I got into Spelman College, where for the first time in my life, I was surrounded by Black entrepreneurs, Black business owners. I was able to, my Clark's sister was one of the biggest entrepreneurs in Atlanta. I was like, wow, I want to do that. I want to make that type of impact where I can inspire other people to also do just that. And the thing is, too, we're not taught that, like, she's not the very first, you know, Black entrepreneur in Atlanta. She is with a long list of Black entrepreneurs in Atlanta. There is a rich history that's just not being taught to us, which is why representation is so important. Because if I had seen that at 8 years old, I would have been able to correct that at 8 years old. So with my business, I make sure to let people know and give them that positive, diverse representation that they deserve in the books that they read, the toys that they play with, and the clothes that they wear, which is so amazing. And I'm so grateful to the Center for Black Entrepreneurship for being able to pour into me as a student and say, yes, you can do this. Saying, hey, you know, we know that there is an academic strain that happens as a student where you may think that you have to work for another company or that you may have to afford bills for your family. I mean, there are so many first-generation college students, a part of the CBE program, that they are aiding and helping us be able to be strong entrepreneurs and make that into a reality. So I'm so grateful. Some of the resources they've given me already is one, an academic scholarship, which has been such a blessing. Two, they've also given me mentorship with more people who are in the industry right now, and they're able to say, hey, these are some hurdles that you can jump over now that you don't have to go through, which means absolutely everything, because in a lot of other communities, they're able to have those conversations, but they almost seem like a secret in the Black community, where it's like, oh, you know, I have an investor. I'm not going to show you how I got that investor, but we're finally like bridging those gaps that I've had, you know, for the past 4 years, but for the past 3 years as an entrepreneur. But now the Center for Black Entrepreneurship is truly bridging the gap, and I'm just so grateful.
Well, let's talk about that journey. You know, Melissa, you know, the yes you can, I mean, requires a tremendous amount of support, and there are so many legs on the journey, right? It really does evolve over time. Can you just talk a little bit about what are you seeing as some of the critical needs that owners of Black business have at each stage?
Yeah. So, you know, I think the beauty about being in America or anywhere these days is there is a belief that you can be anything that you can see, and thank God we can finally see Black founders. I think that we have to begin to acknowledge there's a difference between starting a business and building a business. And I think that we live in a place where, thanks to TikTok and Instagram, anybody can start a business in 5 minutes or less, which has pros and cons. Because we then begin to see the numbers that Andre was talking about, where we're creating all these businesses, but they are sole proprietors. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that is not necessarily a deep path to wealth creation. So I think at the early stage, you see a lot of, yes, you can, go for it, apps, technology, programs that say, start a business. But then we see a cliff effect, where it's like, okay, you did it, that's my expertise, then where do you go? And so I think we're seeing kind of this gap of, how do you actually move from founder to CEO? How do you actually build a business? How do you hire people? How do you fire people so they don't come after you? And I also think there's no one talking about how to be offensive and defensive in the current legal environment once you move from a startup. And I think the reality for folks that are where Pinky is, or B, or Squire, or those folks, is that you have PE firms who are just salivating, saying, let me come in and get a discount. And that's the challenge, right? So I think you're seeing, go for it, we think it's great. When it's time for you to really make that pivot and grow, we're seeing extremely high interest rates, higher for us as people of color. We're seeing lower checks for Black founders. We're seeing lack of follow-on checks for Black founders. And so I think once you get to your seed Series A, it's a slump. And then when you think about Series B and on, there's not a lot of us that are Black GPs. And not to say that's the only people that can invest in Black folks, but it certainly helps facilitate the conversation. I also want to say that, you know, we have to say that, yes, we're seeing growth in Black founders, but we're seeing competition, again, I cannot say enough, in capital, right? You have those angel investors and others saying, hey, I'm going to make more money in less time if I put it in the traditional capital markets than waiting 10 plus 2 for you to maybe have a 2x return. And so I think we also have to realize that Black founders now are facing this competition of just the capital markets that really is hard for us to compete with, because our trajectory takes longer. So I do think that in the vein of Solutions Summit, I think we've got to do a lot more on the PE side to help educate them on how to appropriately value a Black business. I would argue that Pinky's business is worth way more than that if people understood how to quantify the value of community, as we see with you, as we saw with B in Target, and that's not part of the equation. And so the same way we talk about like alternative credit scores, I think we have to think about alternative valuation methods of what is the value of the culture when Black founders are able to build these kind of businesses on the backs of communities that are going to support them no matter what.
Oh my God.
I need her in my next board meeting.
Right?
Okay, Melissa, come, please.
Lock her. I mean, because we spend so much time talking about patient capital, but I love this framework of saying, no, alternative valuations. To your point, Pinky, 14 restaurants. Yeah, I think I saw somebody from McDonald's in here. But, you know, you are now a household name in the community, and that says a lot. You talked earlier about being able to go to investors for capital, but really you are the only one, right, who believes in the dream that you have. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that dream is? What is it that you're trying to unlock?
You know, it's interesting because it evolved, right? So when I first started Slutty Vegan, it was like, okay, I'm tired of eating Chick-fil-A side salad and fries every day.
Amen.
And all the food that I like closed at 8 o'clock. And you know, as a vegan, I haven't eaten meat since 2007. So like the pickings are slim when you are vegan and plant-based and you want to get something to eat. So because I already had my dream job and I was making money and I was already doing all the things, when I started my concept, it was really an opportunity to solve a personal problem, right? But then I realized that the problem was just bigger than me. I'm like, there's a problem in the Black community, right? A lot of Black people that I engage with knew nothing about vegan food. Quite frankly, they didn't care, right? It wasn't in communities in which they could really identify and understand really what this is and that vegan food could actually be good and tasty and healthier, right? Because they just didn't exist in a lot of our inner city neighborhoods, right? So it started there. But then I'm like, okay, all right, so now I got Black people paying attention to eating vegan. I realized that you can be yellow, white, blue, or orange and still don't know about veganism. There's white people coming to me saying like, well, you know, is this vegan? I didn't know. I never had vegan food before. And Asians and Africans and Indians, no, I take that back. But other people, you understand what I'm saying? Like the reality of it is that this is not a black and white conversation when you talk about veganism. So my dream has evolved so much since I started because I'm just trying to serve the people. Slutty Vegan is a universal brand. It don't matter what you look like. It don't matter how old you are. It don't matter your religious beliefs. What matters is the fact that I can bring people together from all different walks of life and they can fellowship in community by way of the vessel of food. The food is just a cherry on top. So I feel like this is a modern day Martin Luther King's dream because when I see all the people standing in my line, I'm like, I am really building community and it don't matter who you are, how much money you make. When you come in this line, you could be whoever you want to be. So that is my dream. And I get to do that and use that as the foundation to really unlock the pathways of entrepreneurship, which is why I started the Pinky Cole Foundation. Because I feel the need to be the beacon of the voices of entrepreneurs. I'm on social media, right? And 2 days ago, I posted something and I said, we should do a group economics experiment, right? And what that experiment was to take entrepreneurs, find one, and everybody gets super hyper focused on that one person, and we help them not to close their doors.
I love that.
Right? And do you know, I got 4,000 comments, so everybody's waiting to understand like who I'm gonna post. But what that is going to do is it is going to show when we all come together, no matter who you are, no matter how much you make, when we all come together to support one cause, it's a win for everybody. And that is the dream. And as long as I can continue to do that, I know that when the idea of Pinky Cole Hayes is long gone, people will remember the fact that community was important for me, that giving people quality economic opportunity was important, and then utilizing my resources so that people can really be the best versions of themselves.
Yes.
That's it.
Oh my God, I love that.
Yes.
I love that.
Yes.
And what a legacy, because, you know, for entrepreneurs, small business owners who are just starting out, being able to afford the rent in the space that you're in, to pay your sales taxes, sometimes that's the thing that takes you out of the game really early on.
It's hard.
Nyla, as you think about the ecosystem of young entrepreneurs that you sit in, when we're here a year from now, what is it that you hope we're able to sort of say, what are we thinking about? How has the world changed for you all?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. I mean, I see so much, but it really boils down to the name of this panel, you know. I really see us being able to support Black-owned businesses at every stage of the capital journey. And I mean supporting us at the ideation stage, because there are so many people, young people, old people, middle-aged people, who have the best ideas, who have the next Amazons, Facebooks, McDonald's, but they're just ideas. They don't have the capital to make those ideas into reality. So it's really making sure that everyone in this room who has the power, who has the tools, the resources to be able to invest in those ideas, let's do it so that we can have the next Black-owned Fortune 100 companies. So I really see that. I definitely see, you know, the next time we come to the summit, that there's going to be change. I think there's so many people in this room who have the power, who are feeling a spark. I mean, I'm already moved by the 3 people I'm here on this panel with. I mean, you guys are such an inspiration. And just, you know, creating more Black CEOs and Black founders and Black investors so that we can once again plant the seeds that we want to see grow forever. And they truly will grow forever, but we have to plant them first.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
Melissa, I'm going to close it out with you.
Okay.
You know, I know that you and your team at Georgetown and have been at 1863 have been deep in research mode. What is sparking your interest and curiosity as you look ahead, and what is the call to action for all of us in this room?
Well, so I want to just piggyback on what Nyla said. I mean, I think grants were great, but we now know the lawsuits, they're probably not going to continue.
Exactly.
But even if the lawsuits hadn't happened, what was happening with the grants is they sent a signal that black businesses needed to be subsidized. We don't need to be subsidized. We just needed investment.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and what we found, we realized that 60% of all businesses fail within 5 years. What we found is that black and brown businesses last at least 8.5 years. So we are some resilient MFs.
Yeah.
The challenge is that longevity does not correlate to access to capital. And so we have to be careful when we say entrepreneurship is the pathway to wealth, because in many cases we are subsidizing our own businesses, as I'm sure you were before you got that first check.
Oh my God, we just did a study in Richmond that
See?
showed
Same thing.
exactly that
Same
like
thing.
actually starting a business was wealth depletive,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Because really, what to your point, what was happening, people were mortgaging their homes
That's
and all
right.
this other stuff.
But we've sold it as the American dream.
Yeah.
But what happens is it then takes away and it gives us a dream deferred because we've invested in ourselves. So I think my call to action and my desire is that I would like to believe that right now, because of the lawsuits, to me that signals fear of power. Because of the proxies of the Pinky Coles and the Bees and the Squires and everybody else, there is precedent that businesses, and Rich and others, there is precedent of African-American businesses being acquired at really large amounts. And because of the plethora of individuals, I dare to say, I asked Raj, what did black high income mean? And it was 75th percentile, which I know is everybody in this damn room, because that just means you have to make over $200,000. And I'm looking at some specific people, right? But if we to say, but I think if we can become advocates and leverage community to support the business, but also be there to fight these lawsuits. If we can think about, if we can individually write a check to make that investment, if we sit on boards to encourage them to do business with, and I think finally, if we recognize, not being political, but if we recognize that it's not just voting in elections, but many of you in this room, I'm sure you have voting shares. I don't know how many of you ever use your proxy to vote on companies. And don't just check. I always notice they say, this is what we prefer. I never vote for what management wants. This is never, because I know it's not about me. But I think at this point in time, the data shows, and I'll end on this, if people look back from the Kerone report, also called the Riot report, where it was a danger to every single American because of discrimination and racism, and you look at the city report of $16 trillion, and you look at all the studies of Brookings, do you know that by 2040, if we had invested in black people or get our act together, we could have $4 trillion positive and completely eliminate America's debt?
Yeah.
Completely. So this is not a race thing. This is not a female thing. This is an American thing. That we, as the fastest growing segment, can literally solve the national debt if you invest in it.
All right.
And I got the math. I got the math.
Let's do it. Let us be the rising tide, as they say, that lifts all boats. I love the way that you're challenging us to use our voices in all the rooms that we're in, whether it's our proxy shares when we're voting, the boards that we're on, but also to help to shift the model, right, where it doesn't serve us. So if we need to think about alternative ways to value a company because of the extrinsic value, we should be pushing for that. Melissa, Pinky, Nyla, thank you so much.
And go to Slutty Vegan.